Hello everyone and welcome to Books in the World. I'm delighted to be here today with Erin McHugh. We're going to talk about Pickleball is Life, the complete guide to feeding your obsession. But before that, I do want to tell you that Books in the World is a production of the Cape Cod Writers Center, and we have been producing this show for continuously since the 70s. It's the longest running book talk show in the country, and we get help from the Cape Cod Media Center, and we are part of the Cape Cod Writers Center, which is even older. It's having its 60th anniversary in 2023. So if you're a writer or even interested in writing, the Writers Center has a conference every summer in August, and we'll be publicizing that. Books in the World is really designed to give people in the publishing industry, authors, publishers, illustrators, editors, a forum on television so that they can practice their skills, getting interviewed, publicizing their book. So today I'm delighted to meet Erin because I had a very strange meeting at an art gallery in Tiverton where people were talking about pickleball. Who knew? So I don't play pickleball, but my husband does, and I hear a lot about pickleball. So some people from, I think, South America were talking with the receptionist at there, who happens to be a friend or a pickleball teammate or player in Fairhaven, where you live. So
you're right.
That's how wild and crazy the pickleverse is. I've learned that this is a word, and I like saying it, the pickleverse.
I do too.
You know? So welcome, Erin.
Thank you so much for having me, Marilyn.
It's delightful. First of all, I have to say, before we really get in, and we're going to explain pickleball a bit, that this book is a hoot. This book is so well done, so much fun. It's informative, it's a great resource book, but it's also just a hoot to read.
I'm glad you say that, because that was my intention, sort of half source book, but also a lot of fun.
And you have a lot of experience in publishing, and you can talk about that a bit.
I do.
30 books that you've written?
I think this is number 31. I could have lost count, who knows. I started as a kid in publishing, as an editorial assistant in the 70s in New York, and so I've sort of been all over the industry, mostly doing marketing and advertising and writing about other people's books. And I was at an ad agency as the creative partner for a long time, but all our clients were book publishers, so it's really in the thick of everything, and so every single book that an author who has come along in the in the 80s and 90s, John Grisham and Stephen King and John Irving and, Margaret Atwood, whoever, worked on we worked on their books, which was awful exciting. And, our job, of course, changed up all the time. Who was the next book coming in from a client? So it made it really interesting and fun. And after a while, I had some big jobs. And then in the I guess it was about 2005, now I'm 54. And I thought, I've been writing about other people's books all my entire career. I'm going to start writing my own. Big dreams. Who knew if that would work out? And so I didn't want to leave the industry, is the thing, because I'm so, also, besides pickleball, I'm also obsessed with publishing. And I thought, let me do something. What else could I do in the industry? So you know what? I walked up, lived in New York City still. And I walked up to the Upper East Side Barnes & Noble, and I got a job as a bookseller on the floor, minimum wage.
Minimum wage. I know personally that they pay nothing, because I also wanted to do that at one point when I was in transition, and I was like, So just in case you forget, I want to tell everybody that your books, your 30 books, range from trivia books to books for kids to books about geography for kids and quotes and trivia and more trivia.
History.
A lot of, I think you could find a gift for anybody in your world if you looked up your books. So you must have fun.
I do have fun. I've written, I'm not one to think that I would be writing books that are about inspiration, but I sort of do, and including this it tends to be inspiring from what people have told, because I think it gets people who might think, well, maybe I'd like to play, but how do I start, and things like that. It gets them off the couch and out on the court.
And I have to add that you have a little section there where you have quotes from famous philosophers and writers, Confucius.
Yes.
And what she does is she inserts the word pickleball wherever they said life.
Right.
Basically.
They all fit perfectly, oddly enough.
You don't know any off the top of your head.
I can't remember off
Well,
the top of my head, but
we may get back
there
to
were some
this,
funny
but
ones.
that's
I don't want to
down
misquote the greats.
that's down the road a bit. So, when did you start playing pickleball and where?
I started in South Dartmouth, where I live, and one day somebody said, we're all going to play pickleball. This one friend said she wants to teach us, and it was at a sort of a community center. And I said, well, what's that? And she told me she didn't know much either. And she said, well, this friend says she knows a lot of the rules. I said, all right, let's go. So we all got together, and no one knew what they were doing, which turned out to be fine.
Yeah.
And it was pretty funny, and I thought, this is fun. I had played tennis for, as a kid. And then, I moved to New York, and as an editorial assistant made 5 cents. And so at the end of every week, I had about $6 left. So, you could either find 3 other people to play at an indoor tennis court, or you could go to a disco. So the disco won for the next 42 years, I'm afraid. And so I hadn't played tennis in about 40 years. And I wasn't sure when I moved back to South Dartmouth in 2018, I wasn't sure that I had it in me anymore. Do you know what I mean? At this point, I was 65, 66. And I thought, I'm not sure I could pick that up again. And then pickleball came along. And one of the great things about it, of the many, many, is that it's so easy on your body.
Okay.
So many people that are, and I think this is why it has the reputation of starting out, and it's a reputation that is well earned among retirees and people who have moved to Florida for the winter and all those places which have pickleball courts in their, at the clubs or in their villages and whatever. Because a lot of tennis players who now have hurt their shoulder, they've hurt their elbow, they've hurt their knees, and the court is about a quarter the size of a tennis court, and you usually play with 4 people. When you are playing, you're playing with a very light paddle and a ball, which is a wiffle ball.
This is the ball.
So I mean, it actually when the sport started, they actually started playing with a wiffle ball. So we're playing with these instruments is not very hard on your body.
Yeah.
And so that became, a real boon to it, a real bonus to playing. And so there was a tennis court right behind my house, owned by the Quakers who live next door. And I saw that nobody seemed to play on it. It was all newly redone. And so all my friends said, go and ask them. You go ask them. Yeah. And I thought, you know what, I don't want to be the neighbor that gets involved in and has to go to church every Sunday. Because, pickleball's my church. I want to do that on Sunday mornings. So eventually I couldn't stand it anymore. And I went to them and I said, I didn't want to offend them. I said, do you think, I noticed that the court isn't used that much and it's so beautiful. I wonder if you'd consider, maybe think of it, get back to me next month, never, whatever. If you would think about us like painting some lines on the court and a portable net so you could just move the net and people could still play tennis. But if you don't, then the lady says, fine. I said, that's it?
Yeah.
Fine?
Yeah.
And she said, I love it. Well, now it's used all the time by the community and the neighborhood. And they are so thrilled, and everybody's become friends, and everybody buys their Thanksgiving pies. It's become,
interesting.
Yeah, it's
really interesting.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Now, hard upon the heels of us all starting to play, me and all my neighborhood friends, came the pandemic. So we took the court down, the net down for about 6 weeks, Madeline, when everything was so scary, so scary. You didn't want to leave your house. And then everybody just started to think, well, do we stand 6 feet apart from each other on the court? Sort of. Yeah. So we put the net back up, and we thought, well, we'll play in mass. that lasted 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
But we did for a long time, because we didn't know, we would sanitize the balls before and after we played. But this is how the sport grew so exponentially during these last few years. Families who were in their own pod, you know, you're living with grandparents and parents and kids of all ages, they realized, well, that would be a way that they could get out there and do something simple and inexpensive and get some relief. And I have to tell you, during those really scary times, being out there for an hour and a half and forgetting what was going on in the world, so many people will tell you it just really saved our psyches.
Yeah, that's great. So the tennis, the court's about 10 feet wide and
20 feet wide.
20
and
feet wide.
44, 20
Yeah,
by 44, yeah.
So it's a lot easier to get around than a tennis
A lot
court
easier to
is.
get
you
around.
can pretty much stand in your service area, and you know you have a partner.
That's right.
So, you know, when you're talking about what you did with the net, reminds me of the story about how it was created. Which, first of all, it was created in the late '60s.
Yep, 1965.
So it's not just recently, no, and
It's not just recently, but on the other hand, it's not so long ago.
right,
Because, you know, when you start researching something like Egyptian history,
well,
you don't really have anybody to talk to about it.
right.
In this case, I tracked down 2 of the kids of the original inventors.
Yeah.
And spoke to them. And that was, you know, something, how often do you get to do that, to go back to the source?
Right.
And it was really fun and fascinating, and they are wonderful stewards of the game and terrific people, and they are so amazed at what has happened, they can't believe it.
But this started when these kids were like 11, and their father and their friend
Yep.
got some old badminton net out of the garage, and I like the story about how they had ping pong paddles and they tried to take the rubber off.
They did.
You know, they
They
just literally just said, okay, what are we going to do with these kids today?
Right. Well, one of the kids named Frank Pritchard.
Yeah.
So he was the original, you know, there's always a kid. Like, they're on this beautiful island.
Bainbridge
Yep,
Island.
Bainbridge
which
Island,
A lot of people have heard
off
about
of Seattle.
That. Yeah, yeah.
And like any kid, no matter if there's like 1,000 things to do, you know, he says, there's nothing to do around here. He's in the most beautiful place. He's 13, of course
Right,
he's going
right,
to say
right.
that. He's so bored. And his father said, well, you know, when I was a kid growing up here, here's the first part of the sentence you never want to hear as a kid, right? When I was a kid growing up here, we invented our own games all the time. So Frank was sassy, said, okay, you go invent something for us.
Yeah.
And his father said, okay. And he, you know, went up to the barn and found an old badminton net, which was his parents'. And so they had sort of a dumpy little badminton court that still exists out in the backyard of the sort of ramshackle house. And so Joel, his dad, who was there were three of these guys. Joel ended up being he ran for Congress and won, and then he became, I think, lieutenant governor of the state. When he went on the road, I think he'd go out and speak to people. And he was really the first ambassador. He'd go out to speak to people, and I think he saw when they were getting bored, he'd say, let's play some pickleball. And he'd get all this stuff out of his trunk and get people out playing. So that's sort of how it first traveled outside the island when he went back to Seattle. So he set it up. He set up the net at waist height. And found a wiffle ball and bat, which Frank had gotten for his birthday, and not his son Frank, and not used, and got the wiffle ball. And as you said, found some ping pong paddles, tore off the rubber part, and played with those, which is not unlike the shape of the paddle as you see even today. It's sort of like an oversized ping pong paddle.
I want to just comment that this is a high-tech, state-of-the-art.
It is.
Probably weighs less than a pound.
Yes,
Yeah.
it weighs, I think, about 7 or 8 ounces, and it's a brand new product from Franklin, and I'm in love with it.
Love with it. So one of the urban myths is that the game was named after a dog, their dog, and tell us the real story, which no one's going to believe.
I know,
and they have
but
to
it's true
believe
because
you.
I got it from Frank. So a lot of people think it's named after a dog named Pickles, who was a cockapoo that the Pritchards owned. Pickles the dog did not come along until 1968. Frank should know was his dog. And 1965 is when the sport was invented. What happened is that, again, Frank's parents, Joan and Joel Pritchard, had met at Marietta College in Ohio. And there is a big crew team there. And it's, it's a very big part of the college athletics, has always been. This would have been in the 50s. And Joan was reminded, because the sport still is so ragtag, it's so goofy, it's so dopey, it's so fun. She said it reminded her of what they called the pickle boat, which is at the end of the day when there's one boat left and there are sort of like the sides that the kids haven't picked back, like in dodgeball. There are a few people left over. They get put in the pickle boat, and it's sort of like the odds and ends of who's left over to get in that boat. And so she said it reminded her of sort of the ragtag nature of playing the sport. So she started calling it pickleball.
Well, now that you've told the story and I've read it, I know there are a lot of people who are not going to believe it, but you're going to set it straight. It's true. So, the rules, you have all the rules carefully described, and I'm like, oh man.
I have some of them. Believe me, I had to read them 300 times to make sure I didn't
tell
misquote.
us this. I think, well, if you've played racket sports, a lot of it's going to be very familiar.
Yes.
To
and
you,
familiar
I think.
Also, like, as they say, riding a bike. Once you pick up a paddle, you're like, I get it.
Yeah, you get it. And even the thing about the scoring, about the us, them, me.
Yeah, the scoring is ridiculous, and no one can.
Us, them, me means you have to announce the score.
There are 3 numbers to the score. The game goes to 11. You have to win by 2. So, and there are 2 servers on each side. So, and it goes from server 1 to server 2. So, if I was serving to you on the other side and our score was already 5-0, I would say 5-0 to you, and then 1, me being the first server.
Right.
When I lose the score, when I lose the point, and I don't get a point unless we are serving, it goes to my partner. So then it would be 5-0-2. Then it goes to the other side. So it's very hard to remember. There's a lot of, people get irked when people can't remember the score, because then once they can't remember or they misquote, then it throws everybody else off. But it is a rule. It's technically a rule, and it's funny. I've noticed as time goes on and I play with my friends, we adhere more to what the rules really are. Like you have to say the score before you start. Technically, you lose the point if you don't say the score.
Yeah. But friendly people probably don't do that.
No, but it is irksome. So it's polite. It's really, the etiquette also speaks to, please say the score and say it correctly before you start.
Well, there's a lot of colorful lingo, and one of them is the kitchen. Don't totally describe it because it's too complicated. But there's an area called the kitchen, and you have to keep out of the kitchen.
That's right, and that's a funny story in itself. It's 7 feet each side, from the net, and it started on day 1 again.
Yeah.
In the summer of '65, where once all the 3 dads and the kids started playing, and the parents took it over pretty quickly because it was so fun. They invited a guy over and his 2 sons, who were named the Browns, and they were neighbors. Unfortunately, they were 6'4", each of them. The kids were 16 and 17, and the dad. And so they kept supposed to be friendly, kid friendly. So they would stand at the net and slam it down. And so one of the parents said, one of the inventors said, no, I'm going to draw a line here in the dirt. You got to stand 3 feet back. Still, bam. Okay, 5 feet back. So finally ended up 7 feet. They decided was how far you had to be back to not be able to smack somebody in the head. Right?
But the ball has to bounce in the kitchen first?
The ball has to bounce in the kitchen before you volley it. Yeah, you cannot step into the kitchen. So
don't step into the kitchen.
So it makes it a much friendlier game.
Okay. So I'm just going to mention the other lingo. You can tell us whichever you want. The dink, the falafel, and the golden pickle.
A dink is in the kitchen when you have to stand behind that line at the kitchen line, and you try to dink it over the net. It's onomatopoeic almost. You dink it over the net your best shot is going to be a cross-court shot. If you watch the pros on TV, and there's a lot of pro pickleball and the tour on TV now, you'll see that this is what they do. They do it 25 or 30 times. Ding, 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 until somebody hits the back just 2 or 3 inches too high, bam. Then the slam fest starts, right?
Okay.
So it's a lot of strategy and finesse, the game. You get a lot of people, as we call them, bangers, who just want to play tennis and bang it as hard as they can and show off.
Show off, yeah.
You might think that there are more men than women doing this, and you might be right. So the dink is that. So to work on your dink is a whole nother game. And again, sometimes you'll find, you're into playing a year or two before you think, I got to start playing with some finesse.
Okay.
And I play now and again in Central Park when I go back to New York. And it is the melting pot you think it is.
Okay.
It must be, I bet during the summer, they put up the nets at 8:30 in the morning, and they take them down when it turns dark. So it's 12, 13 hours of playing. And I bet 150, 200 people come through there a day. They come at lunchtime. It's, work from home. They come, they sneak out for an hour. They come before work, after work. It doesn't matter. And they just come and they go, and you put down your paddle on the side of the court, and the next 4 paddles go out after you force them before you finish this.
Can I tell you what's going on in the Cape recently? And then we'll get back to some of the fun stuff in the book. There are 10 permanent new courts in Marston's Mills.
So great.
And there are 6 more on tennis courts. So about 16 games can be going on at once.
Right.
And so 48 people can be playing at once. And then on a good day, 10, 20 or 30 people are waiting.
Yeah.
And they have a sign-up board, just in case anybody who's watching wants to know what they're going to see when they go down to Osterville, Barnstable Road in Marston's Mills. So you sign up. They have 3 levels, the blackboards for different levels. And sometimes there's a volunteer who helps direct traffic. And that's it. You go and you play with whoever needs somebody to be played with. You don't have to go with your own friends. And
I can't say enough about that kind of round robin playing. It's really wonderful. And you play with your friends all the time, and that's one thing, but you get to know your friends' games. When you go play with strangers, sometimes it's harder to play with somebody who's a little less good than you are, or somebody's got a great shot that you've got to get used to. And a lot of what pickleball, the great thing about pickleball is the social nature of it. It is so friendly, and so people are happy to give you tips. Nobody wants a beginner to go in the advanced group. But you're right, you shouldn't be shy. I can't stress it enough. You shouldn't be shy. If you want to go down there and watch one day too, go down there and do that. And you'll see this was, as Madeline said, a whiteboard, and there are spaces. And so you'll see 4 people sign up and 4 people sign up for the next, like that. And maybe you have to wait 1 minute, maybe you have to wait 10. But in the meantime, you're talking to people, and everybody loves pickleball.
it's great.
It's a lot of fun. It's a great way. I can't tell you how many. And I was reticent when I moved home. I didn't know if I'd make new friends. And I've made now, different kinds of groups of friends, and so many of them through pickleball.
I want to talk about a couple of things, but we're running a little bit low on time. We were talking about tennis, and I just found out, and you probably know all about this, but John McEnroe is playing with Andy Roddick and Andre Agassi and Chan at a pickleball tournament in Florida. So I guess what I always thought, because some of my husband's friends sounded to me like pickleball was a step down from their great prowess as tennis players, but they've gotten old and they have this problem and that problem. So then we find out that John McEnroe is playing pickleball, and some of the other celebrities that you mentioned in the book.
Serena Williams said I might make it my second career.
And Leonardo DiCaprio and Ellen DeGeneres. And
crazy about it.
George and Amal Clooney.
Yeah. Also, there is, everything changes so fast. And one of the things that has happened is there is now there's already a professional pickleball tour, but there is now Major League Pickleball. And teams are being bought by celebrities. Brene Brown, LeBron James, Tom Brady, all these people. They are buying teams, and now the pros, the pickleball pros, are signing up to be on our team like you would the Boston Red Sox. And it's great because it's raising the not only raising the profile, but it's raising the pot, the money that you can make from pickleball, which is sort of negligible.
I find this all very funny.
It is
I
funny.
really think it's great. It's wonderful.
It's a dopey sport. It's as goofy as can be.
I've actually played once, and it's not that hard to do.
No,
it's
it's one of those that takes a minute to learn and a lifetime to master.
That's a good way to put it.
But the minute to learn part is what makes it so accessible.
Okay, the social aspect of it is covered in the book, and Erin has delightful personality types, the alpha type, the urban ninja. All has something to do with the clothes that they wear or their personality on the score, which is a lot of fun. There is no off season. They have a special glove that you can put on.
I think there's no off season. You know, I mean, the group I play will say, well, there's never too cold for pickleball. There's just not dressing right.
I love that. I love that. Okay, well, let's talk about the après pickle life.
Yes. Well, the thing is, you've had so much fun.
Yes.
And you know, the thing about loving pickleball is I find I'm a little bit of a missionary. You know, I want everybody to feel the joy that I feel. I want everybody to play. So it's nice to, and you'll find that people do, they'll take anybody out and say, I'll teach you how to play. And then, you know, once or twice, then hopefully they go off on their own and they find their, you know, water will seek its own level and they'll have some fun. But because you're having such fun, you sort of don't want it to be over. So where I've been playing in Fairhaven, which we were saying, they have such an active pickleball association, wonderful people. And on Friday nights of the summer, they will often do a potluck at the courts. And you'll see 30 beautiful dishes hanging. They bring it there, and people come and sit. People will just sit. Others will play pickleball. There's music, and so everybody wants to still hang out. So there are some recipes in the book about, you know, things you could do so you can still do them on the court or near the court, après pickle. The Cornichon martini, of course, is very popular.
Cornichon is a little French pickle.
A little French pickle.
In case, and it's got vodka, gin or vodka,
pickleball juice,
and pickle
pickleball juice. You know, the pickle brine is thought to cure many things, including like if you have a cramp in your leg. It's a long-standing antidote.
Erin, I have to bring this to a close. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
We have had so much fun. I've had a lot of fun with your book, the few week or so that I've had it. And I really appreciate your coming. I want to tell the people who are listening that they'll love it. If they know anybody who plays pickleball, they'll really like it. Make a great gift. And I assume it's available all the online book selling sources.
Yep, it should be in bookstores everywhere. I would just always say, if you feel like you want to play and you know somebody who plays, ask them if they just play. Would you mind taking me out for half an hour and show me how it's played? Everybody will say yes, and then you're on your way.
Wow, sounds like fun. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
It's a lot
Thank you
of
for
fun.
having me.
Thanks for coming to Books in the World.
Love it.
So if you would like to watch this interview, it'll be on YouTube as well as on your local cable television. You can go to the Cape Cod Writers Center website, capecodwriterscenter.org, and you'll find a link there to this interview. Thank you so much for watching.